All right, you're welcome back. The Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, is worried by the decaying standard of education in the country and wants the federal government to take urgent steps to address the situation.
Yeah, the union has asked the Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, to declare a state of emergency in the country's education sector without further delay to proffer solution to the sector's enormous problems. Now, he says government has failed to improve access to quality education for Nigerian children, despite the millions who yearn for a good education.
Well, ASUU insists that the quality of education in the country must be improved to allow it to be at par with global education standards. We still have Dr. Ekere very much with us in the studio. We're trying to squeeze all we can get from him today. We've also been joined by the chairman of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, UNILAG chapter, Dele Ashiru. Good morning and thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we'd like to hear from you first. This call for a state of emergency to be declared in the education sector, it's been on for a long time. In January, the Education Minister, Adamu, actually told Nigerians that by April, if not April the 1st, that state of emergency will be declared. And well, April is wrapping up and we still haven't heard anything. The ASUU president said it's needed more now than ever before, especially now that we know that Mr. President realizes that most Nigerian youth are not educated.
Well, thank you very much. What ASUU is only doing is to remind government of its initial promise. You will recall that early this year or very late last year, there was an education summit organized by the Minister of Education, for which the President himself was in attendance. And it was at this summit that the Minister told the world that in view of all the presentations by ASUU and other stakeholders within the Nigerian education sector, he was going to declare a state of emergency. In fact, he was asking the President to so do. ASUU today is at a loss as to why till now no declaration, nothing of such is even in the front burner. Even the National Assembly that is supposed to be concerned with the state of education in Nigeria is the one bickering over, you know, who jumps out of a vehicle and for that reason suspending plenary session. So I am saying that, like all promises by government, this is also one that must be treated with a lot of suspect. And because ASUU will not wait until things continue to degenerate beyond tolerable level, that is why, I mean, ASUU is beginning to not only draw the attention of government to the promise it freely made, like the government has always made, and to also draw the attention of the Nigerian public to maybe another looming crisis in the education sector on account of this seeming government neglect.
All right, before I come to Dr. Ekere, let me stay with you here. When we talk about the issue of declaring state of emergency in the sector like education, what is supposed to constitute this state of emergency? What makes up that state of emergency?
Well, from the perspective of ASUU, what we are saying is, till date, there's a document which is called the Needs Assessment of Nigerian Federal Public Institutions. This was a document put together by a committee of the federal government, TED Fund, ASUU, and other critical stakeholders within the Nigerian public university sector. And at the end of this wild tour of these universities in Nigeria, a compendium is on the net. I mean, people could go look for it. A number of critical issues within Nigerian public university system, you know, were identified. Chief amongst which decaying infrastructure, I mean, low capacity development, and several other, you know, problems afflicting the education sector. And on the strength of that document, ASUU went into negotiation with government. And it was agreed that given the state of education, as at that time, government will need to inject on an annual basis 220 billion into the public university sector in Nigeria to shore up all these decayed facilities. And also that government should, as a matter of necessity, reorder priorities in Nigerian universities. You find a university with no basic amenities for critical research, and then you see the gates. The gates are more beautiful than the classroom. You see, you know, a question of priorities. You find a situation where to sign an ordinary memorandum of understanding, 5, 6 principal officers of a university will need to go abroad only to meet a coterie of, you know, young individuals over there. So we're saying that in declaring this state of emergency, make good your promise of a committed injection of public funds into, you know, public universities in Nigeria.
And that is just the universities you're talking about.
Not other sectors.
The emergency that should be declared, of course, should affect primary, secondary, and university,
because
and what
of course what gets to the university will
start
start
from the primary.
So if you have very bad products from that level, it
you
will
expect the same thing.
I mean, at that higher level.
Yeah. Dr. Dan Ekere, let's bring this back to you. How bad is it really? And maybe the question is, how did we even get to a point where our education sector got so bad that we need to declare a state of emergency now?
Well, it is very bad. And how we got here is because of bad governance, in very simple words. You know, over time, we have actually not prioritized education. And it seems as if virtually all the, you know, heads of government over the years have equally, you know, looked at it from that angle that, well, what is more important is building roads that people will see and say you are performing. And at the end, you don't even find the roads. I remember listening to Chief Obasanjo recently in an interview, I think with Teju Babyface or so, where he said he, you know, he attended some whatever, and he became more enlightened, he became more educated to the point that he has now seen that apart from food that you need to eat to be alive, he even brought in the issue of health and food together. He said the next most important thing is education. Unfortunately, he got to realize this after he has left government. The chances are that practically all the presidents have the same mistake of realizing
a lot of things.
Because you will recall that practically every sector is a function of the education sector. Because banks, hospitals, name them, all the hands you find in these places must have gone through training in the education sector. So if you don't have well-trained hands, you are not going to get the best result of whatever you are looking for. That is why in some cases you begin to, you know, look at these facilities here and look at perhaps even the personnel and say, no, London is the best place, let me go for a medical surgeon there. Otherwise, the people doing it there are not spirits. The only thing is the facilities and the training. In some cases, I remember...
But the same, let me just, the Obasanjo that you mentioned, and,
yes,
you know, people of his generation, people would say these people benefited from Nigeria, whether the military, whether it's military, whether, yes,
not just free education,
they were
quality
education.
Yes.
They got the very best. How
yes.
is it that these same people could not pass on the same legacy of good education to future generations?
It is possible. You know, I just read one funny, you know, write-up somewhere of a child who went for an interview and, okay, what does your father do? Who is to sponsor? He said the father. What does he say? He's a blacksmith. And he was asked, you know, whether he has ever helped the father in anything. He said, no, the father has made it a responsibility that my son must go to school. The man interviewed him, said, okay, you will go home and try to wash the hands of your father when you come back. Then, on getting home, the boy discovered that the father's hands were not only as hard as a rock, but that there were a lot of, you know, blisters. And the boy became so remorseful. And when he got back to the interview the next day, it was a different story. Okay, now that is the kind of situation you have, because these people went through this system with ease. they never even got back to find out how the system produced them. And so they have no value for it. They didn't know what to do to bring about that kind of a system. Because you find a state that was providing free education and even health facilities were better. I remember people used to come from all over the world to UCH. UCH is still there, but the facilities there do not work. Yes. So why not eject funds into the system that will eventually produce?
Yeah, Comrade Ashidu is itching to say something.
Yes. You see, if we go historical, we found ourselves in this situation by a deliberate decision by government to decapacitate education.
To what point?
And this is the point. Uneducated people are difficult to ride roughshods on like they are doing on Nigeria. The ruling elites, which some people have described as the ruining elites in Nigeria, they have since discovered that the only way to liberate Nigerians from their shackles of oppression and subjugation is to educate the people. And haven't realized that there are people, leaders in these countries, who promised Nigerians that they were going to make sure that the kind of education they received had never received by any category of Nigerians anymore. And they are doing that. And to drive home that point, you find out today, to get a good job in Nigeria, you must have been trained outside the country. Who are those who can train their children outside the country, including Ghana here? They are this ruling elite. So, the deliberate aspect of it is that the Ivy League jobs, the highbrow jobs, are reserved for those category of individuals. And then, when they are to recruit into the police or into the immigration, you find those ones on the net for people who schooled in Nigeria. So if you look at that mindset by a ruling political class in Nigeria, you find out that they will consistently refuse to develop the education sector to that level which they received. And that is why Nigerians, all critical stakeholders, must be more alive to their responsibilities in compelling government to realize that education is a public good. In fact, before life, there's education. Because if you are not properly oriented, if you are not properly socialized, you can never bring to life an individual that will be useful to society. And as soon as you are also giving back to the process of education, the process of socialization, began.
Comrade Ashiru, one thing Nigerians are concerned about is that ASUU has gone on strike so many times. Remember, in fact, so many of us spent extra years at the university courtesy of ASUU strike. And part of the reason they go on strike is the quality of education. Things have dropped and things have to be changed and all of that. And when they get to the negotiation, government, in their own normal way, somehow will see to their remuneration, will see to their welfare, and then strikes are suspended. Last year, so some unions in high institutions went on strike. They were called to negotiation, one way or the other. Negotiations were made, remunerations were, welfare and all of that were settled, and then the issue of quality of education goes back. So how do we, is it just government or even ASUU is complicit in all of this?
Now, you see, this is my reaction to this. And this is being very frank and very sincere. But for ASUU, there will no longer be anything called the public university system in Nigeria. And contrary to government's propaganda, go and do a comparative study of remunerations of academic staff in Nigeria. You find out that Nigerian academic, even in the West African hub, is still the worst remunerated. Now, most times when ASUU go on strike, we are also sensitive, to the lives of young people that are yearning for education and for whose parents cannot afford Covenant, Babcock, Ghana, London, Barbados. So, when we go on strike, and also understanding the character of those that are governing us, who will prefer to take $1 billion from, the reserve to fight an imaginary unending war, which if you spend that money on education, that war may become unnecessary. Remember, such a billion naira was also withdrawn from government's coffers during the ancient regime, the last regime.
$1 billion.
Yes. So, when ASUU make demands on government, and in a negotiation, it's give and take. No any part of the negotiation would say, unless I get 100%, I will not board.
Yeah, but it seems when government cedes ground as far as the welfare of teachers or lecturers or the academic staff, once that is solved,
up till now,
then the real issue is left
up till now. Yeah, government is still owing academic staff emolument allowances from 2011. This is 2018, running into several millions, and we are still urging on.
Okay, Dr. Dan Ekere, let's even go foundational, the primary school level. We hear that most primary school teachers themselves are not, they're not, look at the Kaduna case, for example, where 21,000 out of 33,000 teachers flunked the primary 4 exam to test their capacity and all of that. And then you had this hue and cry about no, an El-Rufai could not just, sack them just because they didn't pass. If we don't get the quality right from the foundational level, which is the primary school level, what do we expect from the secondary school or the university?
Well, thank you. First, before I go there, I want to equally sound the note of warning that the idea of trying to keep public universities with the aim of building private universities, for as long as you have made it in such a way that graduates from this part of the world are seen as half-baked, even the ones from the private university will equally be affected. As a matter of fact, they are even worse than those from public institutions. Now, coming to the issue of primary education and the Kaduna saga, I don't want to see the Kaduna issue as a reference point, because one is that I'm not too conversant with the test itself, how it was conducted, and I'm one person who don't believe in El-Rufai.
Well, it's not just in Kaduna. It happened in Edo State too. And you had the problem with Fayemi.
Edo State, there was a particular woman. Now, the question you should ask is that the woman, is she a trained educationist? How the person got into the job is the issue, not that there are no qualified teachers. See, now, the problem is that we have not equally prioritized even the primary education. And today, private schools employ all manner of people. It is even worse with the primary and the private institutions, because they bring in anybody they feel they can pay any pittance and we begin to work.
All right, so Dr. Ekere, let me put you on hold. We will come back to talk about this because it's time for the news update now. So we'll be talking about ASUU and the call for a state of emergency in education in Nigeria. We'll come back to talk about that more. But it's time for the news update now, and we have Ugochi Oligbo standing by. Ugochi, it's over to you now.
Many thanks, Guy. About 20 persons have reportedly been killed by suspected headers in Benue State. The attackers targeted a community in Guma local government area barely 24 hours after 19 persons were killed in a church in the same state. A member of the House of Representatives from Benue State, Dixon Taki, disclosed this while speaking on the floor of the House. And the House of Representatives has resolved to invite President Muhammadu Buhari to explain the worsening security situation across the country. This resolution followed the motion on the incessant killings in Benue State, especially the last that claimed the lives of 2 Reverend Fathers on Tuesday. The lawmakers say President Muhammadu Buhari has failed in protecting the lives and property of Nigerians. They passed a vote of no confidence on all the service chiefs and security advisors to the president. The House resolved to suspend plenary for 3 consecutive legislative days to protest the killing of Nigerians in cold blood. The lawmakers want President Buhari to declare all killer headers terrorists. The Independent National Electoral Commission will begin verification of signatures for the recall of Senator Dino Melaye on Saturday. This is as a result of a recent ruling by the appeal court which gave INEC the go-ahead to carry out the exercise. The verification exercise is set to hold in 552 polling units in 7 local governments on the Kogi West Senatorial District. The result of the exercise will be announced on Sunday. The Nigerian Senate has summoned the Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, to appear before it and explain why Senator Dino Melaye was manhandled by his men. The decision followed a resolution on a point of order by Senator Samuel Anyanwu, who lamented the senators are being treated like common criminals across Nigeria. Senate President Bukola Saraki also said he had been unable to reach IGP Idris Ibrahim as the police chief refused to pick his calls. The Red Chamber adjourned plenary for senators to pay a solidarity visit to Melaye at the National Hospital, where he is on admission. And back to the discussions to Mike and Ngozi now.
Thank you, Gochi, for the updates there. I think we have to just round off with what we're discussing before we go into sports right now.
Yes, indeed. And of course, we still have Comrade Dele Ashiru right here in the studio with us, and Dr. Dan Ekere talking about the need for a state of emergency in the education sector. Now, a report by the World Bank not too long ago was really troubling that only 12% of the Nigerian youth or Nigerians are more educated than their parents. Just to give a good idea of how bad the education sector is right now. Let's even talk about the state universal basic education SUBEB funds and all. 35 billion naira, we're told, is just there lying fallow, and the governors, the state governors, who are expected to follow suit if the federal government does go ahead to declare a state of emergency, they don't have access to that fund.
Yes. The challenge is with access to the funds. You find even ETF, there are funds, but to access this fund, you begin to hear that so number of universities and the rest, so states and what have you, have not been able to access it because they needed to meet. So if you make the conditions too stringent, then you are indirectly saying that the funds should not be accessed, because at the time it will take me a whole year to begin to process access to funds that ordinarily have been meant for a particular project, then you'll be, creating more challenges than the problem you're trying to solve.
Some state governors have been accused in the past of
diverting the
funds.
No, that is part of the problem
they
of
provide the counterpart funds, and then when they get it, they divert it.
Why will I give you funds to carry out a project and they are diverted and I'm quiet? It means I'm part of that diversion. Because if the government has actually proposed this fund for a particular project, and the funds are collected, normally there are always monetary teams. You don't need to wait until the funds are exhausted before you raise alarm over the diversions. So you should be able to monitor to the point that these funds are not used for marrying other wives and building private homes. Use it for what it is meant. Now, it is on both sides. You don't wait, begin to tell us that governors have diverted these funds. What about you who made the funds available? What is your responsibility to ensure that the funds are properly utilized?
We have to round off now, but we must thank you all for coming. Dr. Dan Ekere, University of Lagos, and as well the ASUU chairman, UNILAG chapter,
the comrade chair himself.
Ashiru. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
so much,
much.
gentlemen. All right, it's time to go into the world of sports, and so much is happening there.
Before we even go there, you remember we've been talking about Rwanda at the time?
How
when it comes to
private schools
are closing down.
Yes, in favor of public schools, because the public schools are providing better, quality education facilities are there, and what have you. If Rwanda can do it, what is
Nigeria?
Wrong? What is
now another aspect there is, Nigeria has the highest rate of out-of-school children.
About 12 million now.
Yeah,
12 million. Now.
But the minister of education at the time, late last year, was saying that no, the numbers have gone down to 8 million. The UN puts it at 10.05%. Sorry, 10.05 million. And all of these figures. But the point there is Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children.
Yes, indeed. And in Benue State alone, 300,000 kids are out of school because of the security crisis.
That state of emergency, I think something really has to be done about that.
Absolutely.